Hi, my name is Lilia. I was born and raised in a neighborhood that would never make it onto any travel guide. Narrow streets, cramped houses pressed against each other, and the sound of old motorcycles served as my natural alarm clock every morning. My mom ran a tiny food stall at the end of the alley, while my dad had been too sick to work for as long as I could remember. Growing up, I got used to living with limitations. That didn't mean I wasn't happy, it just meant I had to accept that some things would never come easy for me. Okay? Before we continue to the story, press the like button, subscribe, and comment in the comment column. Where did you come from? At school, my friends used to talk about their vacations abroad, about the brand new clothes they wore, while I just smiled, looking down, pretending I didn't feel that sting of envy. But one thing kept me going. My belief that I wasn't allowed to stop dreaming. At 16, I started working part-time, everything from cashier shifts at a convenience store to running a tiny booth at He night market. I did it all just to stay in school, to help my mom, and to taste even a little bit of freedom over my own life. Now I'm 22. I still live in that same little house with my parents, but my heart is full of gratitude. I believe everyone deserves a chance at a better future, no matter where they come from. I never imagined that this simple belief would eventually lead me to him, Ethan. Our first meeting felt like something straight out of a movie, the kind you don't plan, but suddenly find yourself in. He was different from anyone I'd ever met. The way he dressed, the way he talked, even the way he saw the world. Ethan came from a wealthy family. His education was smooth, his career promising. But behind all that privilege, there was a kindness in him that made me feel accepted without conditions. At that time, I thought maybe this was the beginning of my life changing, and I wasn't wrong. From the day I met him, my days were never the same again. What I didn't know was that the happiness I found would slowly turn into the toughest test of my life. It all started the day I first met Ethan. I was working at a small cafe near downtown. It wasn't a fancy place, just a simple shop with the smell of coffee forever soaked into the walls. I was used to standing for hours behind the cashier, greeting customers with a smile that wasn't always real. Most days felt flat until one afternoon. A man in a crisp blue shirt walked in and ordered a cappuccino. That was Ethan. There was something different about him. Not just his appearance, which was way more polished than most customers, but his eyes, the way he looked at me, calm, attentive, as if he truly listened, even when all I asked was, "Do you want sugar with that?" At first, I thought he was just another passing customer, someone I'd never see again. But I was wrong. He came back a few days later, and then again, and again. And until I realized he wasn't just there for the coffee, he was there because of me. We started talking. At first about little things, the weather, music, books. Then slowly, the conversations got deeper. Ethan told me about his life, his dreams, and even how suffocating it felt living under his family's expectations. For the first time, I felt seen, not as the poor girl from a backseat neighborhood, not as the tired barista behind the counter, but as me. With him, I felt valued. Still, the closer we got, the more I felt haunted by the differences between us. He grew up with wealth and comfort, doors always open for him. Meanwhile, I was just me, a girl trying to survive one day at a time. I tried keeping my distance once, afraid reality would eventually crush me. But Ethan wasn't like anyone else. He kept reaching for me, breaking through the walls I built, convincing me maybe just this once I deserved happiness too. I had no idea that behind his warm gaze was a whole other world waiting for me, a world that would push me to my breaking point, testing my courage and my dignity like never before. That world became real the first time Ethan took me to his house. I remember how my heart raced the entire drive. His car cruised past manicured parks and rows of gorgeous homes I never imagined I'd step foot in. Every second made me more aware I wasn't just the girl from the alley anymore. I was walking into a world that didn't belong to me, one full of expectations and standards I barely understood. When we finally stopped in front of his house, I froze. The massive white building with its sprawling garden made me feel small, unworthy. Ethan squeezed my hand gently and smiled. "Don't worry. They'll like you," he said. But my chest was already tight with nerves. I knew being different from his family wasn't a small thing. I'd always been strong. But now I felt like I was stepping onto a stage without a script, with everyone watching and judging my every move. Then Murdoch Graham appeared. His presence was heavy the second he entered the room. Tall, sharply dressed, radiating confidence that was almost intimidating. His smile was thin, but his eyes, sharp, studying me like I was a misplaced guest in his perfect world. I forced up a light smile. But deep inside, I felt out of place. Mrs. Graham, on the other hand, was different. She welcomed me warmly, her voice soft, her manner kind. But even with her kindness, I could feel her husband's shadow looming too large to ignore. Through dinner, I tried my best answering politely, keeping my composure, pretending I wasn't shaking inside. But the longer it went, the more I felt like every word I said, every gesture I made, was being measured against impossible standards. Standards that screamed, "You'll never be enough." The only thing that kept me from breaking was Ethan's hand holding mine under the table. Still, deep down, a fear began to grow. I wasn't just facing Ethan's family. I was facing a world that had the power to shatter my confidence in an instant. And I didn't know then, that night was only the beginning of the hardest test of my life. A few days after that dinner, I could still feel the tension clinging to my body. Every time I remembered the way Mr. Graham looked at me, my heart would start racing again. I began questioning myself. Was I really good enough for Ethan? Did I truly belong in his world, one that felt so far from my everyday life? Ethan, of course, tried to comfort me. He'd send little texts or call just to make sure I felt safe. "Don't let fear control you," he'd say. His words were sweet, but they couldn't completely erase the shadow of doubt that had started growing inside me. I started noticing things I hadn't before, the way Mr. Graham raised an eyebrow whenever I spoke, as if silently questioning every choice I made. The way he compared me, without words, to Ethan's polished, perfect classmates. It felt like I was dancing on thin glass, one wrong step, and everything could shatter. I tried to stay positive, to show who I really was. I even cooked a simple meal and brought it to Ethan's house, hoping Mrs. Graham would like it. Ethan smiled proudly, but I could still feel his father's cold stare freezing me from the inside. The more I tried, the more I realized this wasn't just about meeting a wealthy family. This was a silent battlefield where pride, patience, and courage were tested with every breath. If I wanted to stand by Ethan's side, I'd have to fight not only Mr. Graham's judgment, but also the doubts inside myself. That night, when I returned to my small bedroom, I stood by the window, trying to calm my restless heart. I knew this journey was only beginning, and whatever came next would demand more than just courage. Weeks went by, and Ethan and I grew closer. He often came over to my house, helping my mom with dinner, or just sitting on the porch listening to our stories. His presence made our little home feel warm, like all my worries could fade away, at least for a while. I slowly started to believe in myself again. I realized I could be loved not for wealth or status, but for who I truly was. Every smile from Ethan, every sweet word, reminded me I was worthy of happiness. But behind that happiness, one shadow kept haunting me: Murdoch Graham. Every time Ethan mentioned another dinner at his house, my chest tightened. I knew Mrs. Graham's warmth might ease some of the tension, but his father's eyes always made me feel like I was on trial. And eventually, the moment came. Ethan invited me to dinner again. This time, something felt different. The air in that house seemed heavier. as if the walls themselves were holding a secret. When Mr. Graham greeted us at the door, there was a sharp glint in his eyes, like a warning that no matter how close I stood to Ethan, I still didn't belong. That night, I smiled politely, spoke carefully, and tried to show the real me. But deep down, I knew the true test had only just begun. One wrong word, one wrong move, and everything could collapse. What I didn't realize was that this night would become a turning point, one that would change how I faced Ethan's world and how I proved I was more than just a girl from a poor neighborhood. Dinner that night felt different. The crystal chandelier cast warm light across the room. The smell of expensive dishes filled the air, and like conversation floated around the table. I tried to stay calm, smiling, answering questions with care. But then Mr. Graham's stare froze me. Without warning, without hesitation, he dropped the words that cut deeper than any knife. You read nothing but straight garbage. What makes you think you belong here? The world stopped spinning. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. But his words crashed into me like a heavy stone on my chest. I had never felt so small, so humiliated. Every effort, every smile, every ounce of courage I'd built, all of it shattered in a single moment. Ethan's face turned red as he tried to defend me, but his father brushed him off coldly, asserting his dominance. Mrs. Graham looked at me with pity, but she didn't dare challenge her husband. I wanted to run, to cry until the pain disappeared, but something inside me held me back. I realized if I walked away now, I'd lose before I even had the chance to prove myself. That night, I left their house wounded, angry, but determined. I couldn't let Mr. Graham's words define me. I had to show him and myself that I was more than just street garbage. By morning, that determination mixed with fear and confusion. I loved Ethan, but I knew our relationship wasn't just about love anymore. It was about facing the shadow of Mr. Graham, who had the power to crush my confidence and tear us apart. All day, I thought about how to stay by Ethan's side without losing myself. It felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong step, and I could fall. Ethan sent me a text. I know this is hard, but I'm here for you. Don't let my dad's words decide who you are. His words comforted me, but the sting remained. That evening, I met up with my best friend, Leela, sitting on a park bench. I told her everything. She listened, then looked at me and said, "You're stronger than you think. This isn't about them, it's about you. Don't let them take away who you are." Her words lit a spark inside me. I realized this wasn't just about love or acceptance. It was about finding strength within myself. I had to stand firm not only for Ethan, but for me. That night, as I closed my eyes, I felt a mix of fear and resolve. The real conflict was only beginning, and I had to be ready to face a world that might never welcome me. A few days later, Ethan invited me back to his house again. My nerves were worse than ever. On the drive there, I stared out the window, trying to calm my racing heart. But his father's words echoed in my head. You read nothing but street garbage. When we arrived, Mr. Graham was already waiting in the living room, expression cold and unreadable. The tension in the air made it hard to breathe. His eyes swept over me from head to toe as if weighing whether I was even worthy of standing in that room. Every word I spoke that night felt like it was being judged. Even when I answered the simplest questions about my job, somehow my tone felt wrong to him. Ethan tried to step in, but his father brushed him off with a cold nod, as if to say, "Let her face reality." The pressure was suffocating. It felt like the entire world I'd built my hope of being accepted and loved by Ethan could collapse in just one dinner. I swallowed the pain and forced a smile. But it was stiff, unnatural, and fake. Mrs. Graham glanced at me a few times with sympathy, and I appreciated it. But it wasn't enough to ease the sting inside me. Deep down, I started wondering, am I really strong enough to survive in this world that feels nothing like mine? When dinner finally ended, I went home completely drained, not physically, but emotionally. I realized that if I wanted to stay by Ethan's side, I had to be more than just the girl who could smile politely. I needed to find a strength inside me that could stand against cold judgment and unfairness. That night, lying in bed clutching my pillow, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't give up, because if I gave up now, I'd lose before I even tried. And I knew the real test had only just begun. A few days after that tense dinner, I sat in my room, watching the evening sky fade through my small window. A storm of emotions weighed on me, fear on one side, but also a spark of hope on the other. Ethan was still there, always reassuring me, his smile carrying a warmth that made my heart tremble. But the shadow of Mr. Graham haunted me. Every time I imagined facing him again, my chest tightened. I began questioning myself, my strength, my worth, my right to love Ethan without being crushed by his father's cold disapproval. I tried to talk to Ethan about my fears, but the words always felt too small to capture the weight on my chest. He held my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "I believe in you. I don't care what my dad says. What matters is us." His words lifted me, but they also opened a new dilemma. How could I stay strong if the real battle hadn't even begun? I knew love and determination wouldn't be enough. I had to prove myself not just to Ethan's family, but to myself. That night, I poured everything into my journal, my fears, my doubts, my fragile hopes, and my burning determination. Writing it down made one thing clear. If I wanted to survive this world and be truly loved, I had to face it with my head held high. And when I closed that journal, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. Weeks passed, and I realized Mr. Graham's words hadn't just wounded me, they had shaped me. They left behind a fire, a stronger resolve than I'd ever had before. If I wanted to stay with Ethan and prove who I really was, I had to set a goal, to show that I was worthy of love, not because of status, but because of who I am. I started taking small steps. I worked on my skills, pushed myself to learn things that would make me feel more confident in front of Ethan's family, and practiced keeping calm under pressure. Every day, I trained myself to control my emotions, to choose my words carefully, to steady my heart. The first real challenge came sooner than I expected. Ethan invited me to his father's birthday celebration, a huge event with family, friends, and business associates. I knew this wasn't just another party. This was a battlefield where Mr. Graham could intimidate me or even humiliate me in front of everyone. The whole night, I tried to smile politely, answer questions carefully, and show my genuine warmth. But from the corner of my eye, I could feel Mr. Graham's gaze, sharp and heavy, judging every move I made. And yet, something unexpected happened. Despite the fear, I felt a new strength rising inside me. Ethan's quiet support at my side helped me stand taller. For the first time, I wasn't facing his world as a scared little girl. I was facing it as someone ready to hold her. Ground. That night, I went home exhausted, emotionally drained, but also proud of myself. I knew the road ahead would still be long and full of obstacles. But that turning point gave me one certainty. I could keep moving forward, as long as I didn't give up. And deep inside, I realized the real conflict had only just begun. Days after the birthday party, I sat at my little desk, thinking about my next steps. I knew polite smiles weren't enough anymore. If I wanted to prove myself, I had to be independent, smart, and strong. The first step, my career. I applied for a new job, something more challenging, something that would demand courage and confidence. I knew it wasn't just about the job, it was about proving to myself that I belonged. On my first day, nerves nearly ate me alive. The office was big, my coworkers were experienced, and I felt like a child lost in a world of grown-ups. But I remembered Ethan's words, and Lila's too, "You're stronger than you think." With that thought, I spoke up, tried to keep pace, and slowly showed that I could handle the rhythm of the work. Through the chaos, I kept thinking about Ethan. I wanted him to be proud not because I was perfect, but because I was trying. And whenever Mr. Graham's shadow crept into my thoughts, I used the sting of his judgment as fuel to push myself harder. But the challenges didn't stop there. Some coworkers made subtle remarks about my background, hinting at the class differences I thought I'd left behind. Each word was a reminder I had to prove myself not just for Ethan, but for me. That night, when I got home, I sat on the porch, looking up at the night sky, and took a deep breath. I knew this journey was going to be long and full of obstacles. But that very first step gave me something important, the belief that I could handle whatever came, my way, one step at a time. With that new determination, I braced myself for the next challenge, the kind that would test not only my courage, but also my patience. The days that followed felt tougher than ever. At work, I had to deal with a big project that demanded precision, creativity, and the guts to present in front of important clients. Every tiny mistake felt like a disaster, and every small success felt like a quiet victory I had to celebrate alone. I learned that if I wanted to prove myself, I had to work twice as hard as everyone else, and yeah, it drained me both body and mind at the same time. My relationship with Ethan was being tested too. Even though he always had my back, I could feel the constant pressure from his family, especially his dad. Every time I ran into Mr. Graham, I felt that same uneasy knot in my chest. He was always watching me, waiting for the smallest slip-up, just to prove I wasn't good enough for his son. But the hardest part wasn't him. It was me facing my own doubts. There were nights when I came home from work, sat in silence, and asked myself, am I really strong enough to keep this up? Am I truly enough for Ethan? And yet, in the middle of all that pressure, there were little moments that kept me going. A smile from Ethan, a simple text saying, I believe in you, or even a kind look from a coworker who finally noticed my effort. Those small sparks of light in the dark reminded me that I wasn't completely alone. That night, staring out my bedroom window at the stars, something clicked inside me. Challenges will never stop coming. But real strength isn't measured by how many problems we avoid. It's about how we stand tall, even when the world tries to push us down. For the first time, I actually felt ready for whatever came next, so I started planning. I realized that dealing with Mr. Graham and his family wasn't about fighting back or being confrontational. It was about showing who I really was. In a calm and smart way, I wanted to earn respect without losing myself, without pretending to be someone I'm not. Before every family gathering, I prepared. I brushed up on topics they liked to talk about. I made sure to answer with respect, but also with confidence, and I carried myself like I belonged there. Every word mattered. Every move I made was a chance to prove I was worthy of being in their world. At work, I pushed myself too. I took initiative, pitched creative ideas, and asked for advice when I needed it. Slowly, people started noticing my effort. And that recognition, no matter how small, felt like fuel that kept me moving forward. Of course, the pressure never really stopped. Mr. Graham would show up unannounced at family events, or casually drop comments when Ethan mentioned business decisions. His cold, judging stares never went away. But this time, I didn't let them crush me. I stayed calm, kept smiling, and carried myself with a kind of quiet confidence even Ethan noticed. One night, I called my best friend Leela, told her everything about my little strategies, the way I was learning to build strength from the inside out. She just laughed softly and said, I'm proud of you. You're learning how to stand tall. And that's way more powerful than what they think. When I hung up, I realized something had shifted in me. I wasn't the scared, doubtful girl anymore. I was becoming someone who could face this harsh world with my head held high. And deep down, I knew the next test would be even bigger. A few weeks later, the tension got real. Mr. Graham invited Ethan and me to a big family gathering with close friends and business. Associates. I knew this wasn't just a casual dinner, it was his way of putting me under the spotlight to see if I really fit into their world. Throughout the night, I kept calm and steady. I joined conversations, asked thoughtful questions, and tried to show that I was more than just the girl from the wrong side of town. But Graham's eyes never left me sharp, cold, dissecting every word and move. At one point, he made a subtle remark about my background, comparing me to the perfect children of his friends. I felt the sting, like a fire burning in my chest. But this time, I didn't flinch. I smiled, stayed composed, and reminded myself that dignity speaks louder than anger. Ethan squeezed my hand and smiled at me, giving me the strength to hold my ground. That's when it hit me, real courage wasn't about snapping back or lashing out. It was about holding on to your integrity, even under fire. When I got home that night, I sat in silence, letting it all sink in. The pressure from Mr. Graham was far from over, but I felt like I was finally learning how to navigate this intimidating world. I knew the journey was still long, and every test ahead would only demand more from me. But I also knew something else. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about me, about proving to myself who I really was, and how far I was willing to go without breaking. And right then, I understood the real battle had only just begun. At first, I was terrified. It felt like standing on a stage with no script, where one wrong word could send me crashing down. But this time, I was determined not to let fear own me. I straightened myself, prepared my answers, and controlled every gesture so I could look confident. In the middle of the event, Mr. Graham threw questions at me, tough ones about my education, my experience, even my family background. I swallowed hard, calmed my racing heartbeat, and answered as steadily as I could. My words came out not from pretense, but from honesty and courage. Ethan stood right by my side, giving me silent support with a look full of certainty. His smile reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I deserved to stand my ground. That's when it hit me, true courage and about not being afraid. It's about moving forward even when fear is breathing down your neck. By the end of the night, I went home exhausted, but stronger inside. I knew this wasn't the final test, but the more pressure I faced, the more I realized it was a chance to show who I really was. And behind all that tension, I felt something new, a spark of belief that no words, no looks, could break the determination I carried within me. The days that followed made me think more creatively. I realized that facing Mr. Graham and his family's pressure wasn't just about being polite or patient. I needed to prove my worth through real actions, something they could respect without me changing who I was. So I started with my work. I took on harder projects, searched for unique solutions, and dared to voice ideas I once kept to myself. Every time one of those ideas worked, my confidence grew stronger. With Ethan, I opened up more. I shared how I felt, my little strategies, how I tried to balance courage with patience. He'd squeeze my hand and say, "I always knew you could do this." His words became fuel that carried me forward. But the pressure from his family didn't just disappear. Mr. Graham still dropped sharp remarks or subtle jabs about my background. The difference was I didn't flinch anymore. I stayed calm, steady, and intelligent in my responses. I learned that composure often speaks louder than anger or pain. That night, sitting on my porch, looking up at the night sky, I realized something. Real strength doesn't come from other people's approval. It comes from believing in yourself. And with that understanding, I knew I was ready for even bigger challenges ahead. Soon after, another test came. Mr. Graham invited me to a formal dinner with some of the city's most powerful business and social figures. This wasn't just about small talk, it was about showing poise, intelligence, and confidence in a room full of people who had lived in that world far longer than I had. Every conversation felt like a battlefield. At one point, someone made a subtle joke about where I came from, and I could feel Mr. Graham's eyes on me. waiting for my reaction. My adrenaline spiked, but instead of folding, I smiled and responded with something sharp and clever, proving I was more than just a girl from the wrong side of town. Ethan slipped me a quick text under the table. Just be yourself, that's enough. That little message calmed me down, reminded me to breathe, and helped me bring out the best version of myself, the strong, smart, genuine me. That night, when I got home, I felt both drained and proud. The test wasn't over, but I could see now that every step forward was bringing me closer to proving myself, to being accepted, and to love that was real and deep down. I knew the next challenge would be even harder, but this time, I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready to face whatever came my way with my head held high and a strength that no one could take away. A few days later, the pressure reached a new level. Graham arranged a family meeting that mixed business talk with discussions about Ethan's future. This wasn't just another social dinner, it was a true test of who I was and whether I could really stand in their world. All evening, Mr. Graham's questions came sharp and deliberate about my work, my education, even my personal choices that seemed small but carried heavy meaning. Every word I spoke felt like it was being dissected. It was like walking a tightrope. One wrong step, and everything could collapse. But I didn't let fear control me. I answered calmly, intelligently, with a confidence that came from being true to myself. And every time Ethan gave me a reassuring smile or the gentle squeeze of my hand, it reminded me I wasn't in this fight alone. That night, when I finally got home, I sat in my room just trying to calm myself down. The pressure wasn't over, but I started to realize something important. The biggest test isn't other people's words, it's how strong I can hold onto my own integrity and my own beliefs, no matter how people judge me. And that's how I ended the night, with a new resolve. No matter what happens, I won't back down. I'll be ready to face the one decision that could change everything. A few days later, the most nerve-wracking moment finally came. Out of nowhere, Mr. Graham asked me to join Ethan at an important formal event, one filled with international business leaders. That night, it felt like every move I made, every word I spoke, even the way I stood, was under the sharpest spotlight. I knew this wasn't just about manners anymore. This was the moment that would decide whether I'd be accepted, respected, or dismissed as someone unworthy of standing by Ethan's side. My heart pounded hard, fear and doubt creeping in, but deep inside, my determination burned stronger. When Mr. Graham turned to me and asked about my ambitions and life goals, I felt the weight of everything crash down in one single moment. Every effort, every preparation, every strategy, it all came down to this. One wrong word could destroy everything I'd been working for. And right there I was faced with the hardest choice. Should I downplay myself just to please him? Or should I stand firm, show him who I really am, even if it means risking his approval? The one thing I thought I wanted most. I took a deep breath, looked at Ethan, his reassuring smile giving me strength, and I chose courage. I spoke with honesty, with confidence, and with conviction. I told him who I am, what I want in life, and why I deserve to stand by Ethan's side. The room went silent for a moment. I could feel Mr. Graham's gaze on me, like he was trying to pierce through my words to see if I really meant them. But deep down, I knew I wasn't shaking. I stood tall. I wasn't just some girl from a small alleyway. I was someone brave, smart, and worthy of love. That night, I went home exhausted but stronger than ever. I knew my choice might change everything. But for the first time, I felt like I was truly being myself. And I realized this was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I'd face consequences, but also prove that courage and determination can silence fear. Days after that night, things between me and Ethan's family shifted. Mr. Graham didn't openly show his disapproval anymore, but his sharp eyes were still there, watching, testing me. Still, I noticed something different. Beneath that cold front, there was respect. Quiet, hidden respect. Ethan, on the other hand, was glowing with pride. He kept telling me how calm, how brave, and how strong I was that night. His smile reminded me that the choice I made wasn't just for me, it was for us, for our relationship. And that gave me a sense of peace, like all my effort was finally paying off. But I knew the journey was far from over. Bigger family gatherings, career challenges. The subtle sting of social judgment, all of it still lay ahead. That night was only the first step. I had to keep proving myself not for them, but for me. So I started planning carefully. Every choice I made had to be more than just brave. It had to be grounded in integrity, intelligence, and honesty. Every step became a small strategy to not just secure my place in Ethan's world, but to strengthen my own self-worth. One night, I sat on the balcony, looking up at the stars. My heart was a mix of relief, pride, and caution. The road ahead was long, and I'd need just as much courage, maybe even more. But I smiled, because I realized something. I had already come so far, and nothing could stop the kind of strength that's born from real courage. Weeks later, I started to see the real results. At work, people respected my ideas. In Ethan's circles, friends of his family began looking at me with acknowledgement. Even Mr. Graham, though still guarded, wasn't openly challenging me anymore. But challenges still came. Sometimes, little remarks about my past or the way I carried myself in family events reminded me this wasn't over. I had to stay composed. I couldn't let emotions win. So I built a new strategy: answer every remark with calmness, face every test with intelligence, and never lose the authenticity that made me who I am. That night on the balcony, looking up at the quiet night sky, I smiled to myself. The journey was far from over, but I was walking the right path. My courage, my persistence, and my determination were shaping me into the best version of myself. And I knew the next test would be even harder. But I was ready, because now I understood true courage is born from patience, determination, and unshakable faith in who you are. Ethan was always there by my side, giving me his support and encouragement. But deep down, I knew that my success didn't come from him alone. I had to stand on my own, to prove that the courage and determination I carried belonged to me, and me only. I began to feel a quiet kind of pride. Every positive comment, every small recognition, was proof that I was capable of standing strong under pressure and still showing my true self. I realized that success wasn't about defeating others, it was about conquering the fear and doubt that lived within me. That night, standing on the balcony of my home, I looked up at the sky and smiled. The journey was far from over, and each step ahead would bring new challenges. But I finally felt something stronger within me, the certainty that I could face whatever came my way, with my head held high, my heart steady, and my resolve unshaken. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning of a much greater victory, a journey toward true recognition and acceptance. Weeks later, I began to feel the real impact of my efforts. My coworkers no longer just respected my opinions, they started seeking out my advice for important projects. Even some of Mr. Graham's colleagues showed genuine respect, treating me as someone competent and worthy of being at the table. But the tests never fully disappeared. One day, Mr. Graham directly challenged me, an important decision involving Ethan at the family business. The pressure was heavier than before, not just about social acceptance anymore, but about proving my integrity and intelligence in front of the man who doubted me most. I took a deep breath, thinking quickly. I knew my answer would be judged closely. Carefully, I laid out my reasoning, calm, logical, and confident. For a moment, the silence weighed on me. But then, Mr. Graham gave a small nod, as if acknowledging the strength in my words. Relief washed over me, followed by a sense of pride. I realized that true recognition wasn't just about being accepted by others, it was about affirming to myself that I could hold my ground, stay sharp, and never compromise my integrity. That night, as I sat once again on my balcony under a sky full of stars, I breathed deeply. The road was still long, but I could feel a new power within me, one built from resilience, courage, and unwavering self-belief. And I knew the challenges ahead would only grow. But this time, I had a solid foundation to face them all. A few days later, a small but meaningful challenge came up, one that tested not just my patience, but the consistency and harmony of my relationship with Ethan. This time, it wasn't about social pressure or business expectations. It was something much simpler: how we looked at our future together. I realized that strong relationships aren't only tested by big obstacles, but also by the little things: how we communicate, how we listen, and how we choose to respect each other. I took a deep breath and decided to listen first, to really understand his point of view before speaking my own. Ethan did the same. In the end, we found a middle ground that left both of us feeling heard and valued. It might have seemed small from the outside, but to me, it meant everything. It proved that our relationship was built on trust, communication, and understanding. Even Mr. Graham, who used to be the hardest person to win over, noticed. I caught the faintest smile on his face as he watched us interact. For the first time, it felt like he understood. I wasn't just standing by Ethan's side socially. I was someone who could actually build something real, steady, and healthy with him. That night, sitting on the balcony and staring up at the quiet night sky, I felt a peace I hadn't known before. I realized the biggest battle I had fought wasn't with other people's judgment, it was with my own fear, doubt, and uncertainty. And as I smiled to myself, I understood something. The courage, perseverance, and integrity I had held onto weren't just shaping me, they were strengthening the love I shared with Ethan. The days that followed felt warmer, lighter, and more harmonious. At work, my opinions were respected. Within Ethan's circle, I was greeted sincerely. Even Mr. Graham had softened, showing a kind of openness and acceptance I never thought I'd see. Slowly, all the effort and resilience I had poured into this journey began to take root, not just in how people saw me, but in how I saw myself. Ethan grew closer too. We laughed more, planned more, and cherished simple moments that once felt heavy under the weight of social pressure. One night, while we sat together on the balcony, he held my hand and said softly, "I'm proud of you." More than I've ever said before, his words sank deep, filling me with warmth and gratitude. I looked up at the sky, took a deep breath, and smiled. All the struggles, doubts, and quiet battles had shaped me into someone stronger. Happiness didn't come from finally being accepted, it came from staying true to myself, from holding on to courage, perseverance, and integrity, no matter how hard it was. And in that moment, I knew this chapter of struggle was closing, and a new one was beginning, one that wasn't just about survival or acceptance, but about love, harmony, and a happiness I could finally claim as my own.